Among the many other gifts for that film is a change in perspective. I was coming down the stairs and I was thinking about Dr. Howard Tucker. Just unbelievable. Just unbelievable. So I'd like to welcome our filmmaker, Taylor Taglianetti, is the founder and president of the National Organization of Italian Americans in Film and Television. She's also a producer, director, and celebrity interviewer. What's next is her feature documentary debut. Under her production company, Half House Productions, Taylor also produced the short documentary Heirloom, starring Isabella Rossellini, which premiered at the Los Angeles Italia Film Festival in March 2022. Her career in filmmaking began at the age of 15 when she directed the short documentary Generation Hollow. The film, which won the Jurors' Choice for Outstanding Filmmaking at the 2014 Women of African Descent Film Festival, eerily foreshadows the current crisis of how AI is challenging humans in the arts. She's a graduate of NYU Tisch School of the Arts, and that's Taylor Taglianetti. She's going to be joined by the grandson of Dr. Tucker, and who you saw many times in the film, and a producer of the film, Austin Tucker. Please come on down, wherever you are. Just a fabulous film about a fabulous man.
Thank you.
And I want to get down to a lot of the filmmaking craft that's involved in this because it was just beautifully made and a wonderful thing to see. But let's talk first about how we got started on this. Did it all generate out of, I guess you guys have known each other for a while. Mm-hmm. And at the beginning of the film, we see that the TikTok sensation sort of broke the story loose. But where did it come from before that and after that? How did that all start?
So actually, Austin and I went to NYU together. I had graduated early, and then the pandemic had hit, and Austin called me up saying that Howard was sneaking out of the house to save lives.
It's just another Tuesday for him.
Yeah, and I said, I know you've been telling me about your grandfather often, but isn't he 99 years old? And he said, yes. So then I said, okay, wait a second. We're dropping everything, and we're going to dedicate our lives to making this movie. At first, we thought we were going to do it as a short, but then quickly we realized that was impossible to fit this incredible man's story into a short. So with almost no resources or plan, we just jumped right in.
And what was was there planning right away that you were going to be dealing with him on screen and to tell the story?
Not at all. So originally this was going to be a portrait piece, and I think we were finding it difficult to get my grandfather to really come to life and show who he really is on camera. And Taylor noticed that when I was sort of engaged with him and prompting him and being around him, he really was just ignoring the camera and he was showing his true self. So that's how it sort of came to be that it was going to be sort of my view, telling the story through my lens.
Well, it's always interesting because Austin doesn't really, you have another grandfather on the other side of the family who's also a doctor in his 80s. So grandparents working at that age was like a very normal thing for him. And so I just thought that was so unique. And then also, there's not a moment that I've hung out with Austin where Howard hasn't called him for tech help. So, so I realized that's a pretty unique relationship. And just seeing truly all of those voicemails were real voicemails that Howard has left Austin, and we had hundreds of them to go through.
Yeah, that was just a percentage of them.
And it's so sweet and charming, And so it's true, it's for anyone being in front of a camera, it's really overwhelming, these hot lights. He took it so seriously at first, Howard. He was taking it like a really professional experience. And then as soon as they started interacting just off camera, I said, oh, you know what? I think it has to be told through Austin's eyes.
Well, I think in interactions we do see people's personalities, but he's got such a big personality, such a wonderful personality that's definitely was a great way to bring it out. I just want to talk about who was making the original TikToks and how did that sort of because that's throughout the film, and that's obviously he's got 6 million followers or responses or whatever. So how did that come about? Who was doing that?
So
it was originally we just wanted to show some behind the scenes footage and just try to get some footage out there on TikTok. We never expected that it would blow up. Taylor and I have never created.
That was the first TikTok you saw is the first TikTok we ourselves had ever created. I still barely know how to use.
Is that the first pitch?
Yeah, that was the first TikTok that we ever posted.
And we didn't know how TikTok works, so when we saw like 600,000 views coming in, we were like, is this normal?
Like, this just must be normal for that platform, like it's just inflated. And we genuinely, it was about a year or two, about a year into filming we had done that. So it took on its own life.
It took on its own thing because now it was more than just showing behind the scenes content. It was another way, another medium for Grandpa to get out some of what he's experienced. And we were shocked but very humbled to see that there was a great response from the younger generation as well. They were very fascinated and interested to seeing and hearing more about Grandpa's story, but also a lot of like medical residents. You want to like tell the story about the nurse in the Ukraine?
Oh, yes. What article is that? We read that there was a nurse in Australia who decided to move to the Ukraine and be a nurse there because they had read, it was like a 75-year-old nurse saw on TikTok what Howard was doing and said, I want to do something, like that. I mean,
well, the TikToks
unreal.
that you showed were also really great because I think one of the reasons they got the response they did is because of his wisdom, but in those little checkpoints of like, what's the best way to study? What's the best way to do this? What's the best way to happiness? And those little points were just, and they're throughout the film, but they were distilled into the TikTok moments. I think that's why so many people responded to it. The first pitch, of course, was a great way to open the film. I want to talk a little bit about structure here.
Yes.
Because it's the first pitch of a game, and it's the TikTok, and this is just the opening of the film. It's the first pitch of the film, and it jumps right in, and right away you see his personality. I mean, the fact that he's turning down the wheelchair, and right after that he turns down the sliding chair up the stairs, and this is the guy that he is. So we get into that. Shortly after the beginning of the film, I started to realize how wonderful the score was. Because there are slow, and there's some classical music in there as well, but there's almost Scott Joplin-like jaunty stuff for how jaunty he is. And then in the moments of memory about the people that have passed on and other things about longevity, it goes to a more poignant kind of a score. How did you put together the score? How did that come about?
So, you mentioned before, I run a networking organization for Italian Americans in film and television. So I actually had hired one of my members, and he's a composer in Rome. And for me, I love Italian cinema, and although this doesn't probably bring to mind Italian cinema to anyone, I did want to make this film feel like cinema, even though you don't maybe consider documentary cinema in the traditional sense, but we did try to shoot it like a narrative film in a way. And Cinema Paradiso is just one of my favorite movies, and I told the composer, I said, I want this movie to feel a little bit like that in its own way, and he took that as he did.
Well, it's beautifully put together, and I thought there was a lovely piece of it. And the film also, the way it's cut together is, besides the score, there's a lot of things that he's such a witty guy. He's such a self-deprecating and witty guy, as well as super insightful. And a lot of the filmmaking sort of echoed that. There's a lot of wit to the filmmaking, in terms of the way that it's cut and so forth. So that's part of it is a portrait, but it's a portrait through interaction. Mm-hmm. So was that very intentional, the way that you cut it together, the way that you edited it to sort of reflect that?
Yeah, I mean, we always wanted this to be a feel-good, inspirational film, and there were times when we were in the edit and it wasn't that. And it was really hard at times, despite what you do see now, to get to those moments, because it is a film about aging, and easily that can be very sad. There are some really sad moments in this film. But actually, we brought on our co-executive producer, Samantha Cibarini, right there, and she came on later in the process, but she really helped us a lot with finding those editing points, that really shine through. So she was definitely one of the people who encouraged the baseball scene in the beginning. So thanks, Samantha.
And I think you're right. I think to understand my grandfather, you really just have to see him engaging with other people. That's when he really shines. And he's willing to, not just talk about himself or the stories, but you get to see him in action. And I think that's what's really magical, is just seeing him go through this process of aging.
Well, one of the great things in the very beginning of the film was he's sitting there being filmed, and obviously you're playing for him what other people were saying about him. And he's commenting on it right away, and so in real time. So that was such a wonderful cut to reveal how he feels about what people say about him, and what he's got his own point of view on it. So that was one of the little genius parts of the film in my mind. Of course, the jewels that came out were his motto, that retirement's the enemy of longevity, and I think a lot of people of a certain age, myself being one, really feel that strongly, and you can see it everywhere, but nobody exemplifies that better than he does. The things that he's withstood, I mean, the skiing accident, the falling down the stairs, the different things at that level of life, and still to come back from that, what amazing genes.
Oh my
I mean,
God,
just
yeah.
alone.
Also, after his 100th birthday party, he got COVID and survived.
And bit by a bat.
Yeah, a bat was randomly in his house and bit him. Just
Bitten
shortly
by a bat?
after getting COVID.
At 100. I'm like, you reach that age.
And he did not
So he
complain
is
about
Dracula. I get
any
it.
of it.
I get
Any
it. That's
of
why
it.
he's living forever. It's because he's Dracula. Of course.
We made a TikTok of him like in actually a Batman costume. Right
Halloween, yeah.
after he got bit by the bat, it went over really well.
I think so. It's also genes. He always says genes are just part of it, but for him, from what I've noticed for him, is just his mindset, where he doesn't let anything get in his way. He'll acknowledge if there's an obstacle, obviously, but he adapts and tries to figure out a way around it. And if he can't get around it, he's going to do something similar. And make use of it.
Absolutely fantastic. And also, I mean, there is, whether it's genes, whatever it is, it's the universe smiling on people that have the right energy. But the fact of his couple with his wife, that they have lived together and she survived, he survived. They're both so mentally acute and so supportive of each other. That's just was one of the most beautiful parts of the film, along with the rest of the family, obviously, and how much everybody loves him, whether it's family or not. But she's a wonderful, wonderful creature, your grandmother.
She definitely grounds him, and she is his reasoning. I mean, she's been through as much, if not more, as a female coming up through medicine in the 50s and 60s and raising the family, and she's a little more camera shy than he is, but I think just their interaction and just seeing, I'm used to it obviously because I grew up with it, but.
Well, their interaction is so great, and the way that she understands him. I mean, I love that he says, "I'm her longest patient," and the way that she talks about him, and she's willing to withstand the fact that he's going to do what he's going to do, regardless, and she's okay with that because, as fearful as she is from the things that he goes through and survives, that she's still going to support it, and says he has a comfortable ego.
Yeah,
which I
that's
love.
one of my favorite
There was
lines.
the word narcissism mentioned at one time, but
Even funnier.
It's really in check because he's talking about his hair and so forth. So.
Also, there's something really funny. So the last scene in the movie when he's driving, they're so committed to having meals with each other, which I think is so beautiful. So we needed to get this shot at like the golden hour, and this was like the last thing we were shooting. We were not coming back, and then Sue comes out. And she tells him, she's like, I'm waiting for you for dinner. Like, we're like, no.
I thought she was coming out to watch the final scene. She's like, no, you're coming inside for dinner.
It was so funny. She was so adamant that he eat with her, and she was just waiting for us to wrap up.
Another great part of the film, clearly, is his reflections on what's happened to medicine. Mm-hmm. And where we are with medicine, and people's comments about him that not only having the head, but having the heart, and looking at the whole patient and having the interactions. And like many people, I mean, Zoom was a lifesaver for all of us, but at the same time, it's not the same thing as being in person and having the whole patient. The talk about specialization, sort of isolating different parts of the patient as opposed to the whole patient. So no one could give a better perspective on what's happened to medicine in the meantime. And it just came out of blue, the closing of St. Vincent's. Did anybody know about that in the course of making the film? Did you know that was coming?
Can you believe that? I mean, I don't want to say, for the actual storytelling, like, it's not a miracle for Howard that the hospital shut down, but I mean, like, at the height of his acknowledgement with TikTok, he loses the thing that he loves the most, which is working. And I mean, you can't make that up. I mean, that's just, to see that happen and then to lose it all so fast. I mean, we had almost no time to even prepare to shoot. I mean, we were hoping in Cleveland, there's not many cinematographers, that we would have someone that weekend to even shoot when the hospital was closing down. So, I mean, it's still, I can't even believe that it was, now that I'm thinking about it, it's been 2 years, right, since the hospital shut down?
It's been 2 years, and they were operating it as sort of like an outpatient, but then we just discovered last week they're actually going to demolish it and be done.
Yeah.
So
Unbelievable. So just to be clear on the timeline, when did you actually start filming, and when did you wrap filming?
we started back
October
in
2021.
October 2021.
But we were preparing for a while, for like right around, right? Yeah, right when you told me we started.
We thought this film was going to end first at Passover, at the Passover scene. Then we thought it was going to, get to his birthday, and then you come back, and as a filmmaker, you probably understand it's very hard to know when is the story done, because there's so much stuff you want to capture.
But also, to be blunt, I mean, we didn't know how long we would have with Howard. I mean, it's a miracle every time we would go back that he was willing to participate, let alone is thriving. Like every time when we started, we were like, oh my God, maybe this is the only trip we'll have with him. Like every time we would do it, we would give him this big hug. Like we just didn't know. So it was like a risk in that regard too, and during a pandemic. Shooting.
So you started shooting as we were coming out of COVID, or because there was
It
still
was still
a
in
lot
the
of
middle
mask-
of COVID.
It was still in the middle of COVID, and then there were some other like things that like iPhone and other. We had 3 different cinematographers at one point. So yeah, I believe it was October 2021 that we actually were professionally shooting.
Well, the real benefit, obviously, of what happened at St. Vincent's is the idea of a door closes and a window opens or whatever. It comes out of the blue, and yet it gives you the opportunity to have him chasing a new job.
Well,
which was so beautiful to come out of that tragedy of St. Vincent's closing and him losing his job, which was so sad.
Finds one, and
then he's going to look for a job, and then he finds one. I love that.
Let alone when I was, one of the first things that did interest me was when Austin did tell me, I mean, Howard had created a LinkedIn in the past, not to use it to find a job, but that alone I thought was funny. Like that's just like, and then hearing them bicker about it, about how you have to add a photo and things, and how serious he was about doing this, So that alone is just, these little bits of information.
No, the idea that he's had 25 years experience, that whole debate, that discussion was so beautiful. And
so
I love
relevant.
that Howard Tucker was retired. It's like, don't bring that guy in. He's 87, forget about it. He's a child, he's going through puberty, obviously. Yeah. So just so wonderful found things for you guys. So how full-time was it that you were ensconced in, sort of embedded in this process, working with him and filming? So it was every day? Because you had to be on scene pretty much for every single scene.
Yeah, I mean, we shot in different months. We would go in for 7-10 days at a time and shoot with him. But, us being first-time filmmakers, we had an amazing team with us, but trying to build that team was a full-time thing.
Well, from beginning to end, and we don't know how long this process will continue to take with more festivals and screenings, and if we eventually get distribution. You just don't know how long it will take, and there's a huge learning curve knowing, again, first-time filmmakers, and we didn't have a plan, and I think like half the time the difference between someone who makes a film and doesn't make a film is just doing it. And so we weren't necessarily scared by our lack of knowledge, maybe even more excited just by the opportunity to challenge ourselves. But I would say we gave up every ounce of our free time to this project. I mean, I think there was a time where like a month, I remember we even like locked ourselves in basically just to make sure we were only focusing on this, because we just didn't know how much time we had. And right. I mean, we set up some of those shots, you see they're very beautiful. Like people don't realize that they can take like 4 hours, and then, easily the day is gone soon enough. So we haven't stopped.
Selfishly for me, I mean, I think just getting to spend the time with him throughout this process was the most rewarding aspect for me. Because truly, I didn't know a lot of his stories. I always thought, everyone had grandparents that were in their 80s and 90s doing these types of things, but never really got a chance to sit and talk with him and go through these stories. So it was a blast.
Absolutely, and a tremendous blessing and a gift. And just as first-time filmmakers or whatever, as I've said, it was a beautifully made film. And one of the things that jumped out at me in terms of the shooting, right after he lost his driver's license or he didn't pass the test, is the way he was framed in the doorway of the house. There's sort of the isolation of him, and you could just feel the defeat that he felt. And it was just, by the way it was shot, really brought it out. I thought it was a beautiful piece of craft. We don't have a lot of time left, but I do want to have questions from the audience if anybody's got questions for our filmmakers. Right there, a microphone, please.
Hi, just wondering how your grandparents reacted to seeing the film.
They loved it. I think that was so rewarding. We had our world premiere at Cleveland International Film Festival, which was a blessing to be able to bring this to my grandfather's hometown with all of our family and friends, and they loved it. It was getting to see them watch it for the first time was such a rewarding experience.
Also, he uniquely gave us free reign and to do literally anything that we wanted. I mean, we possessed his house like nothing else. And so, I mean, I think that is really a privilege for us that we were just able to do whatever we wanted. So, seeing his reaction, he genuinely was not ever telling us, "Oh, don't put this in, don't put that in," or "Let me see this before it shows." So when he saw it for the first time, he had not seen anything. So the fact that he was impressed.
Well, it's nice he didn't want to see the dailies.
Yeah. Some subjects would be like, "Oh, let me see if I look at this."
But what makes him him is he still doesn't understand why anyone would want to make a film on him. He says that to me all the time. He's like, "I don't understand why anyone would want to watch a film on me. Like, what's so special about me?"
Well, I just love that he was remarking on the 6 million people that have responded to the TikToks.
Yeah.
Like, what the heck? More questions right here, please. Microphone.
I would think this is a great film to show to youth so that they can, instead of walking past some old guy, discarding the old guy, but realize behind each person there are all sorts of stories. This is an example of major person with major story. It would be a good thing to show to kids. Middle school kids, high school kids. What will your distribution plan be? Have you thought of New Day Films, for example?
Well, just to make a comment on what you said quickly, something I forgot to say before about why and when we decided to make this. Because it was the pandemic, I mean, I grew up in an Italian-American family, like my best memories are growing up around like the old timers, around the kitchen table, and so when the pandemic hit, like I was truly profoundly affected by how many of older people had passed away and with them their stories. So that was a big reason why I wanted to do that as well. In terms of distribution, I mean, we obviously would like to have a traditional like streaming release, but we found at this kind of interesting and new frontier of documentary filmmaking is that a lot of people are doing these social impact campaigns more than anything. So, I mean, we have plans of booking hospitals and medical conferences.
And schools. I think you're right on with the younger generation, which is why we were shocked but amazed with the reception on TikTok. The younger people are interested in hearing stories from older people. And it's not just my grandfather. You're seeing a lot of stories come to life through these new mediums and platforms, and I think it's amazing that younger people can experience that now.
Also, I think our generation and younger are really profoundly lost. Like, we don't have as much of a sense of purpose and meaning as older generations did, maybe at our age. And so I think that when people do see Howard, they are inspired, they are feeling less depressed, less lonely, knowing that someone like him does exist and does contribute to the world at his age. So why can't someone younger, do just that?
Which is a great idea. We have a question right here.
Well, more of a comment. Thank you so much. This was such a moving, powerful film. Really, really loved it. One of the things that really struck me about your grandfather is when he said, I guess he was talking to the residents that he was, teaching, and when he referred to, interacting with the patient, and the patient is not just a toe, it's a holistic thing. And it struck me how in all areas of his life, even with the Uber driver, he's so relational. And I think that doctors really, really, really need to work on that. And it reminded me so much I heard an interview in Santa Barbara last year of Abraham Verghese, who is also a doctor who wrote The Covenant of Water, and he's still a practicing doctor and he teaches, and he emphasized the same thing. It's so important to teach young doctors, residents, interns, about really getting to know the whole person kind of holistically. And he really does that in all areas of his life. One of his colleagues called him pathologically
sociability.
Social pathology.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thanks so much.
We have time for one more. Okay, in which case this is it was certainly a gift for you as first-time filmmakers to have that subject, and it's a gift for us that you brought us this film. So thank you so much.
Thank you for
so
having
much.
us. Thank you all for coming out.
Thank you.